There was a survey that Lexington Law did a couple of years back and found that, in fact, it was 2 years ago, and they found that a third of Americans check their bank balances every day. A third of us. And the people who are in the two-thirds who don't check their bank balance every day typically check their bank balances on the days that their paycheck is supposed to be direct deposited or that they've deposited it to make sure it got through. So just a little thought experiment here. Just imagine that you looked at your bank balance and saw that your employer just put $2,596,153 into your checking account. And then a week later, the same amount shows up again, another $2.5 million. And the week after that, and the week after that, every single week. Well, if you were a big pharma executive, that could be your reality. Regeneron's Len Schleifer, for example, made $135,350,000 in 2020. That's $2.5 million a week, $500,000 a day. Novavax Stanley Erck came in a distant second at $48,070,000 for the year, almost $1 million a week, about $1 million every 8 days. Most other executives in the industry made between $18 million, the lowest paid, Biogen's Michael Von Natos, and $29 million, Johnson & Johnson's Alex Gorksky. These, by the way, these amounts represent both the pay and stock bonuses. So here we've got these multi-billionaire CEOs, but they're not the guys who are developing the drugs. They're not the scientists. They're not the guys who are developing the assembly line or the whatever you call it, where the vaccines and the drugs are manufactured or grown or whatever they happen to be. Those scientists, those engineers, they make a tiny fraction of what the CEOs make. But since 5 corrupt Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court legalized bribing politicians, their companies have gotten very good at bribing politicians, leading to these huge paydays for the executives overseeing the payoff operations. Now, there is a backstory here. First off, the more recent backstory, President Biden and Democrats in Congress, without a single Republican vote, not one, passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which allows Medicare to negotiate drug prices for the first time since 2003. Now, back in 2003, when there was a period there of about 8 or 9 months where Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they passed the so-called Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act. It was signed on December 8th, 2003. And what this law says is that it is now illegal for Medicare to negotiate drug prices with drug manufacturers. The Veterans Administration negotiates drug prices. Big hospital chains negotiate drug prices. The Pentagon negotiates drug prices. But Medicare, because of this one 2003 law that was the result of a bunch of Republican politicians being bribed by Big Pharma, Medicare is the one agency that by law is not allowed to pick up the phone and call a drug company and say, hey, we're going to buy, 10,000 doses of, drug X this week. Can we get a discount? Can't do it. Well, the Inflation Reduction Act allows that, but only for 10 drugs initially. The number goes up over time, but initially just 10 drugs. And last month, a couple of weeks ago, the federal government, the Biden administration, announced what those 10 drugs would be, to much, wailing and gnashing of teeth from the pharmaceutical industry. Just those 10 drugs, by the way, 9 million Medicare enrollees paid as much as $6,497 each out of pocket for those 10 drugs, for a total of $3.4 billion. That's just in last year. And Medicare itself paid an additional $54 billion. Just negotiating the prices on those 10 drugs is expected to save Medicare and Medicare enrollees nearly $100 billion over the next decade. Now, going forward, the 10 drugs is going to be expanded to 20 drugs and then to 40 drugs, or 30 or 40 drugs. I'd have to go back and look. But it gets expanded, so the total savings to Medicare are going to be close to $300 billion for the decade. And, you know, the pharmaceutical industry and the Republicans are very upset about this. They want to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act, or at least that part of the Inflation Reduction Act that allows Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. And if they get their way, according to the White House, the average 62-year-old would pay an additional $7,000 a year in insurance premiums. 14.5 million Americans nationwide would see insurance and premiums go up. Everyone on Medicare will see higher drug prices. Tens of billions will go right back to Big Pharma, which will increase the deficit. 3.3 million Medicare beneficiaries who use insulin will no longer have the peace of mind of knowing their insulin is capped at $35. I mean, it would mean that Big Pharma can dramatically increase the size and number of the campaign contributions, luxury vacations, $1,000 meals, and private jet travel that they offer to Republican politicians. It would, as the White House notes, quote, give tens of billions of dollars in subsidies back to Big Pharma, raise seniors' prescription drug prices, and raise taxes on an estimated 14.5 million people, all while increasing the deficit. So what are they doing? Well, the drug companies have a four-part strategy, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation and the New York Times. First, they're claiming that if they can't continue ripping us all off, they'll stop developing new drugs. Now, the Congressional Budget Office rebuts that, saying that at the most, over the next 10 years, maybe one new drug won't get developed as a result of this. Maybe. Second, the drug companies are disingenuously calling these negotiations price controls, as if we were sliding down some kind of slippery slope toward, you know, a Soviet-style managed economy. The U.S. Chamber is an enthusiastic supporter of this canard. As one Republican healthcare strategist told Politico, their messaging strategy will be to say that the IRA, quote, gets politicians and bureaucrats right into your medicine cabinet. Third, they're arguing that the main benefit of the cost savings will be to the government, not to individual pharmaceutical users. And there's some truth to that. Medicare will save money, but that means that the program will remain solvent. And fourth, they're arguing that it's unconstitutional for the government to negotiate drug prices instead of simply paying whatever the drug companies demand. And they're planning on taking this to the 6 right-wing Republicans on the Supreme Court one day soon. Rick Scott, the guy who was the former CEO of the company convicted of the largest Medicare fraud in American history, went on CNN to lie through his teeth, saying, let's remember just a few months ago, all Democrats voted and Joe Biden signed a bill to cut $280 billion out of Medicare. Actually, they're going to save $280 billion by negotiating drug prices. Caitlin Collins tried to correct him, but he repeated the lie anyway. In fact, he produced a TV ad with that lie in it. It was just pretty breathtaking. As long as the Supreme Court continues to assert, and Congress doesn't overturn this, as long as the Supreme Court continues to assert that big corporations bribing politicians is fully legal, that it's merely free speech, we're going to have this kind of a situation. Not just in the pharmaceutical realm, in basically every industry. You know, in the second or third hour of the program, I will be talking, in the second hour of the program, I'll be talking about Sam Alito and the finance industry. Same thing. Bribes flying everywhere. It's incredible.